It's a close-up.
There's a lot of trees there.
Yep.
Broccoli.
The picture on the top is a picture of the Quick Trip store that's proposed for 19th Street. It's a convenience store, gas canopy, double bay car wash, and a tall pylon sign. That's what the trees would look like when they're 30 feet with the spacing per the ordinance. The difficulty with that, of course, is it's a total hedge screen.
Elevations are those pictures drawn at, because it doesn't look like they're street level. It looks like you're looking from higher up.
No, that would be from a car. From a
So
car.
we're
That would be
talking
from a
about
car.
4 feet elevation.
I don't, whatever my eye level would be at a car, that's the elevation that.
My understanding in reading this is actually that the layout for where the trees went, what species they were, how they were bunched, actually completely removed the city forester from the loop and handed it over to the developer and the property owner.
I didn't think that the ordinance took that power away from the developer, but
No, they would still have to obtain a planting plan from
yeah,
the city forester.
it's still a plan that comes before staff, and so
Right. Mr. Svenby, you still have to sign, or you and the city forester still have to sign off on it?
The city forester would have to sign off on it, correct?
yeah, so.
Right.
And he would designate what type of trees and stuff would be planted within the boulevards.
Just so the council has the full picture, unfortunately, those photos, which we've talked about before, are soft maple, silver maple varieties. They wouldn't be that in the final. They're also 14 foot of clearance is necessary. We always trim those trees to be 14 foot of clearance. Just wanted to add that to that scenario.
So as I understand, from the elevation of a car, and since the trees are 14 feet, you'd actually never look out and see foliage. Unless your car was more
Unless they
than 14
planted
feet tall.
enormous trees to begin with, and we would let them root for a year or two before we pruned them. That'd be the only scenario the foliage would be that low. Usually it's always pruned up.
Reasons. One, this is a community that has inversion pollution during the summer, particularly in high humidity. Trees provide the filtration and the cleaning of our air. We need more trees in this community to take care of our air pollution problems.
Do you know what why there's a different, or from your perspective, why is there a difference of 50 feet for residential and 35 feet for commercial?
I don't think so. I just recently put in residential boulevard trees, and they were mandated at 35 feet.
When did that change again?
No, originally it was 50 feet to include driveways. That was the average.
Yeah,
This whole ordinance is so screwed up, and we keep meeting and meeting and meeting on it. It's just ridiculous.
and I mean, we can pretend that we haven't heard this before, but we know many times, again, we set this up, the standards for residential and commercial both work out to be 35 feet. We've heard that time and time again. The math, the calculation have been done by planning. It is a consistent standard, 35 for everyone. It's just worded a little different for residential.
You get into the impermeable surfaces that are put in this kind of construction, you have a lot of water runoff, and trees manage water runoff. We cannot do without the trees to help do that. Now, I was also going to speak about several things that have to do with the health, the temperature, even economic impacts, because trees shade asphalts, and you have to replace your asphalt less often. If you have tree shade on it, you use less energy in terms of cooling. If you have tree shade, there are so many reasons to talk about trees.
Most importantly, I agree with city staff when they state that granting this variance would be detrimental to the intent and purpose of the Boulevard Tree Ordinance. The city has agreed to the many benefits of trees in the urban landscape and has gone to great lengths to establish policy to create better urban design plans, as illustrated by both the Boulevard Tree Ordinance and the Complete Streets Policy as examples. This is a valuable and necessary move given the growth and change the city continues to experience. The city has established this policy for a reason, to set urban planning standards. We as citizens must adhere to standards and rules and accept them in the same way we accept the responsibility of things like home ownership or citizenship. We expect the same of our city and its development. If you set the rules, you're expected to follow them because you've put them there for a reason. Allowing this variance to pass is a signal to others to ask for the same or possibly more. What would be the point of establishing such standards if you aren't going to follow them? While I agree this process should allow for flexibility, when good reason is given, I don't believe the developer has shown good reason. Number one, the developer cites reduced property values. There's not one single source that I could find indicating a decrease in property value because of trees. Countless sources from state and government agencies, state extension services, real estate agencies, consulting firms, architecture firms, all say the exact same thing. Businesses on treescape streets show 20% higher income streams. 75% of consumers prefer well-landscaped and tree-lined shopping. They stay longer, they spend more money, they visit more often, and they're willing to pay 10 to 15% more for their goods. A survey of real estate appraisers shows that 86% of them agreed that landscaping added to the dollar value of commercial real estate. 92% also agreed that landscaping enhances the sales appeal of commercial real estate. Also, the results suggest that landscape amenities have the highest correlation with occupancy rates, higher even than direct access to arterial routes. Finally, an increase in property values of 10 to 20% is realized with well-landscaped, tree-lined retail environments. This leads to an increase in municipal revenue through property tax assessments. There are many, many sources that cite all of these numbers and say the exact same thing, and they come from places like Gladding-Jackson Walkable Communities Incorporated, the Center for Urban Horticulture, the U.S. Forest Service, the ISA, DNR, and City Trees Sustainability Guidelines and Best Practices, which is a collaboration between the University of Minnesota, the U.S. Forest Service, Minneapolis Parks and Rec, the Lake City Forester, the Urban Tree Trust, and Bone Strew Engineering Firm. Number 2, the developer cites reduced visibility due to 35-foot spacing, maximum height, and canopy spread. If this is a concern, why did they only plan for canopy trees? A frequent complaint about trees is reduced visibility, implying reduced consumer access. Realize that these trees will not be fully mature for 20 years or longer. The visibility of this development will be very much established in this time. A positive response to this concern is the careful selection of species appropriate for the landscape. The developer concerns would be resolved in working with the city forester to agree upon a tree planting plan, the right tree for the right place. With proper planting and pruning for boulevard trees, sightlines for retail structure and signage will be maintained. Trees pruned to standards for boulevard trees and under the supervision of the city forester will not interfere with the visibility. And while we're at it, has anybody asked the developer to compromise and perhaps use alternate placement or height of their signage? 3, the developer requests 50-foot spacing instead of 35-foot spacing and cites several reasons which were without merit. Our boulevard tree ordinance is less stringent than most cities. Common spacing in other cities, including St. Paul, requires 20, 30, or 40 feet for small, medium, and large trees respectively. Many others simply state that spacing is at the discretion of the city forester. 35-foot spacing is adequate given the actual growth these trees may see in an urban boulevard setting due to the more harsh site conditions than residential or parkland trees. In an urban boulevard setting, these trees may not grow to their maximum height or canopy spread. The city forester can recommend trees that are best suited for this environment based on site and environmental conditions such as soil moisture, climate, air quality, and exposure to de-icing salts. 4th and final, the developer requests bunching of trees at their discretion, and I think that's probably what set off the brief discussion earlier, and that's what concerned me too, is that at their discretion. Yet, they have clearly demonstrated why the expertise of the city forester is needed. Planning for only canopy trees ignores the fact that there are many species available of various heights and canopy spreads to accommodate signage or visibility concerns. They are concerned that trees planted closer at 35 feet apart will be more likely to spread disease. This simply is not true, especially if a diversity of species is planted. Disease in trees is caused by things like insects or fungus, in which proximity matters little. For example, oak wilt is caused by a fungus and may spread through root-to-root contact. Not planting the same species of trees next to each other is what matters the most here, not so much the spacing. Other common vectors for disease include insects, and these things may happen regardless of 35 or 50-foot spacing. A careful selection of a diversity of species, disease-resistant varieties, and planting the right tree in the right place addresses these concerns and promotes healthy tree populations and resiliency to disease. This is most effectively accomplished by working with the city forester who has the education and expertise to recommend the proper species. Once again, I'm here tonight to ask that you vote to deny the developer's request for a variance to the boulevard tree requirements. Most importantly, I agree with the city staff when they state that granting this variance would be detrimental to the intent and purpose of the boulevard tree ordinance. I believe I've also clearly established that the role of the city forester is crucial to the success of this project. The city employs a city forester in part to address the concerns in the developer's variance request. By working together, a proper plan would resolve every concern the developer has raised. And if I could show a picture briefly.
You get the front lights, please.
Oh, it doesn't turn out very good at all, and I apologize, but hopefully you're all familiar enough with this location. This is the Quick Trip on West Circle Drive and Highway 14. And the spacing that you see from this angle and from here, that's all 35 foot on center. So as you can see by the size of those trees and the spacing that's there isn't any visibility concerns. And there's absolutely tons of cars there, and I've really never seen a Quick Trip not busy. So this is one example of where that spacing does not interfere with visibility and isn't detrimental to the business.
All right, any questions?
Well, I would ask the city forester, I mean, the claim was made, can you achieve visibility for this business at an average of 35 feet spacing, which is the current standard, or the 20, 30, 40, which was the compromise that we moved ahead with? Can we do that with bunching and tree selection species? Is that something that you can achieve?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Name, please.
Hi, Lindsay Meek, Chair of the City on Urban Design and Committee on Urban Design and Environment. I've been on the committee for about 3.5 years, so I was around to help oversee the implementation of the Boulevard Street Tree Ordinance. And I think it would be doing a disservice to all the folks that have come before me on the committee and put in countless hours and effort towards its implementation and review and ultimate implementation into our code of ordinances. So with that being said, I think Lisa probably said a lot, and I would just agree to most of those comments and encourage the council tonight to deny the variance for the tree spacing. Thank you
very much. Anyone else? Yes, sir, please come forward. I can get your name at the tall mic, please.
My name is John Wade on behalf of the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. We frankly believe that not only should you grant the variance, but you should take another look at the entire tree ordinance in its entirety. I think it's outrageous. I think when you look at it, I'm not just worried about Quick Trip. They are great employers. They build beautiful stores. They take good care of their neighbors. But what about the next business that can't have all this representation to tell their story about a tree ordinance? And we hear about St. Paul. We heard that referenced earlier, and with all due respect, look at Minneapolis. We were told to go look at Owatonna. They've got a more restrictive ordinance. You know what? It's not true. We have the restrictive ordinance. And when you look at a commercial enterprise and how that 50-foot spacing can work, and whether it's from 4 feet or 5 feet or 6 feet, and then you look at the maintenance to go to 35 feet on these things and the downstream cost. So I guess not only would I ask you to grant it, I'd ask you to reevaluate the whole policy and really look at the fairness of this thing in actuality. And how good is this really? And what big difference is it going to make for cleaner air? Because we're all for it. And Quick Trip's for it. And we are for it. And our members are for it. And we're for clean water and renewable resources. We all support it. We're trying to do what's fair. And we're trying to do what's safe as you're driving by there and you're looking to see what business you might be pulling into, and you're going a little bit faster than you are in some Quick Trip locations or other businesses that are operating in this community. And yes, to the woman's point, others will be coming forward too, not because you're granting a variance tonight, but because the policy's not right in the first place. And we'd ask you to take another look at that. But grant the request tonight, and then we'll live to talk another day about this policy. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Was presented on those two posters. And Mr. Rigg points out those are clearly relatively deceptive presentations to you, and that bothers me. Because if the developer is being candid and if the developer is proceeding in good faith, he would have had representational trees and not trees that were cut too low and trees that did a good job of making his point but didn't really fairly give you a presentation on what the argument is. Thank you.
I assume that you're coming at from the development request itself and not the variance, because the variance does specifically say to allow bunching of trees development-wide at the future lot owners and developers' discretion, which of course doesn't include the city forester. I assume that you're saying that this would be overridden in the variance for the language that's on page, it'd be page 81, condition 6. Because the variance itself does, it appears to me, does remove the city forester from having any say in that.
Mr. Dumont, would you come to the mic, please, or Mr. Zelo? Is there an issue with you not to allow the city
No,
foresters?
that's absolutely not true. That's more red herring.
Mr. Zelo, if I could ask a couple of questions. What the council has never directed staff to move this to 50. We did strike a compromise amongst the council, and staff does have the direction specifically to emulate the standards in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is spacing of 20, 30, 40, and with the city forester having the discretion to make adjustments to ensure the visibility. Would that be acceptable to you?
No, the only
That the applicant might agree to plant the difference in trees. They call out 121 trees, if not on the boulevard, on private property.
and basically what that is we wouldn't be able to live with that for.
On the fly, unfortunately. What would happen if we grant the variance with an addition that you would give 100 trees to the city of Rochester to plant wherever they wish?
Our neighbor woods.
I can give you 100 trees. It's not.
Tie the two
Yep,
together.
I can do that. Hereby, for the public record, I hereby grant the money for the difference of trees. You know that. You know we're good for that.
We have a,
You talk about wanting to be innovative and leading, yet when you have a tree ordinance that you have here right now, you're saying that it's extreme. You aren't thinking of it as being innovative and leading other cities as to what they should be doing.
Move denial.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Anyway, I assume that's based upon the findings prepared by the staff on pages 91 to 92.
Yes, so amended.
Discussion.
I'm certainly, not beyond compromise. We've done this a number of times. I thought we came up with a very good, flexible compromise last time. I'd be happy extending that compromise, in this circumstance as well. In this case, we're hearing that it's not good enough. I've got some concerns about that. I was skeptical when we were told that if we didn't address the tree ordinance, they wouldn't go ahead. They went ahead, and now we're being told that if we don't address the tree ordinance, people are not going to come to Rochester. As far as I'm concerned, I don't believe, and I think the credibility was shot last time. That said, visibility for our businesses is very important. I completely concur with that, and that's why I specifically asked that question of Jacob as to whether or not with species selection and grouping, which are allowed, if he could achieve visibility. The answer was a resounding yes on that. Therefore, we can accomplish this. I am very hesitant to do something that weakens the ordinance perpetually in the future. This thing has been under attack for 7, 8 years now. It shouldn't have been this difficult, but as long as we're not willing to stick to our guns, we're going to keep seeing this thing back again and again. And, I specifically, along with that 20, 30, 40 spacing that we've directed staff to go ahead with, if visibility is an issue, the city forester, I think, has the ability to reduce that appropriately as well. There's a lot of people that fought this battle many times, and I don't know how many times we're going to continue fighting it, but as long as we can achieve the goal of visibility, I'm content with that.
And that is the validity of the variance request and the criteria. Regardless of what the ordinance says or how fair or unfair we might think it is, or the emotion behind it, it is what it is. And we have to apply the law in this case. And as I was reading through the legal references, as it talks about a variance request, I'll read one sentence here that with the law that the governor signed into law in 2011, the new law rebrands the municipal variance standard from undue hardship to practical difficulties, but otherwise retains the familiar three-factor test of reasonableness, uniqueness, and essential character. And I think staff made a good case in terms of unique circumstances. We're not applying this ordinance in a way that we would not apply it to any other development in our community. Reasonable use, we do allow for flexibility in the placement of the trees, the species and the size of the trees, so I don't think we're being unreasonable. And essential character, we're not doing anything that would substantially alter the character or demeanor of adjoining properties. And
there's a little bit of a unique thing in that we've already directed staff to make some modifications based on the agreement that we came to, which
The problem is they haven't done it.
Right, and Right, and I understand that, and I think because we're in that unique situation where we're in between, where we have some changes coming, and, you know, I'm a man of my word, I'm definitely going to stick with that agreement that we came up to. I'm sure you will as well. And what I would say, though, is because we are in this intermittent period, if in fact the city council does choose not to, follow the legal analysis that Mr. Staver gave, I would suggest, I would be, accepting of Mr. Bilderbeck's compromise specifically for the unique circumstance that we are in between when we've issued the original ordinance and when staff makes the changes that we directed. With that, noting that condition, that is the specific reason why we're doing this, which helps keep us out of the situation of persistent variance requests coming back. And the second thing I really want to emphasize is that per staff's analysis, and I want it very clearly stated in the minutes, is that the city forester still will have to sign off on this because the variance request itself does take the city forester out of the loop per the language on the last sentence of the first paragraph. When we don't have the city forester signing off on what goes into boulevards, we get like what we had out in Country Club Manor, where I bet the developer got a great deal, but he planted a bunch of ash trees out there. We had somebody who planted buckthorn in a boulevard. We have plenty of trees that were not planted correctly because they were not done, and that's why, in particular, I'm absolutely adamant about keeping the city forester in the loop because, say what you want, of all the people in the room, he's the one who's got a clue what's going on this stuff. He knows it better than anybody. So, and that's why we have him, so he can demonstrate how good of a job he can do with visibility on this.
And he may not be quite on the same page as I am about the parkland dedication fee, per se.
I think so long as we have, the city forester involved in making those reasonableness decisions, I think that's something that we can look for in the future, but I'm not interested in throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
And believe it or not, I agree with you on that.
We're good at this.
We might even get a 7-0 vote.
Yeah.
I simply said the understanding of the goodwill.
That's the only addition to the motion, or to the approval.
And yes, yes.
Okay. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.